They say that history is the greatest of all teachers, and that tales of past deeds define who we are in the present, and what we shall be in the future. It is said that such tales shall, with each telling, illuminate us all with the light of truth. I shall tell you of such a tale. It is a tale quite familiar to me, for I have spent nearly a lifetime piecing it together and chronicling it here within this book. For years I have pondered its passages, studying every line, committing each word to memory. Perhaps now, in the telling of it, I shall at last find the answers I seek. Our story takes place in the northern region of Faerun, known as Icewind Dale. It is a harsh, frozen land, cut off from the rest of the world by a wall of jagged peaks called the Spine of the World. For centuries, the icy plains of the Dale have been home to the barbarian peoples of the Uthgard and Regedmund. Huddled together in small, closely knit tribes, the barbarians lived simple lives, free, proud, and fiercely independent. Until the day an archmage named Erakan came to Icewind Dale. With an army of mercenaries, Erakan sought to conquer the north and force the fierce barbarians into slavery. Long weeks of battle followed, and the scattered barbarian tribes suffered terrible losses. Defeat seemed inevitable. In their darkest hour, a barbarian shaman named Jared came forth and demanded a council between all the remaining tribes of the north. A respected warrior, Jared persuaded the council to put aside their differences and unite against Erakan. Strengthened by a new sense of purpose, the barbarians rallied behind their new leader. The combined might of the Northmen proved more than a match for Erakan, who had counted on the division of the tribes. Wave after wave of barbarian warriors tore into Erakan's hired army, forcing them on the defensive and ultimately into full retreat. As his army crumbled around him, Erakan had time for one last desperate act before his enemies descended upon him. Drawing upon his remaining power, the Archmage breached the planar boundaries, tearing open a portal to the lower planes. The foolish Archmage's cries of victory immediately turned to shrieks of terror as the hideous and twisted shapes of demonkind materialized from the portal and poured onto the battlefield. The sudden appearance of the demons drove the combatants, barbarian and mercenary alike, to turn to meet the new threat side by side. The remaining warriors bravely charged the portal to drive the hellspawn back and were slaughtered by the hundreds. As his people fell around him, the barbarian shaman, Jared, looked up from the blood-drenched snow of the battlefield and caught sight of a lone figure high upon a ridge in the distance. Jared immediately recognized this vision as an omen from his god Tempus, and in that instant, he knew what had to be done. Shouting cries to his god, he charged through the ranks of the demons and plunged into the portal. As Jared's blood fused with the energies of the portal, an explosion of white light engulfed the battlefield. When the light subsided, the demons were gone, and the portal was closed. In its place hovered a disk of solid stone. Frozen within the center of the disk was Jared's body, locked in his final moment of agony, in his final moment of triumph for all eternity. But that is not the end of our tale. It is but the beginning. So it was that the Patchwork Militia set off from East Haven, bound for the troubled village of Kaldahar. with the party of strangers in tow. On they traveled, across the windswept tundra of the Dale, through the foothills of the spine of the world, and upwards on the steep and treacherous trails of the Kaldahar Pass. Eager to seek out the evil that threatened the pass, they did not expect it to find them first. High upon the cliffs of the pass, a band of frost giants had prepared an ambush. Hurling boulders and dislodging massive outcroppings of rock and snow, the giants sparked an avalanche that thundered down the mountainside and crashed down upon the heads of the unsuspecting expedition. Those fortunate enough to survive the avalanche pulled themselves free of the mountain of snow and bodies that now barred the way back to East Haven. Battered and disheartened by the loss of their comrades, the survivors had little choice but to continue on to Kaldahar, alone. In the heat of the battle, the twisted priest of Ilmater stumbled, gripping his chest as if mortally stricken. A faint glow began to emanate from the crystal that hung round his neck. Suddenly, the entire cave was engulfed in an explosion of blinding light. When the light finally died, the party discovered that they were no longer within the dark passages of Dorn's Deep. As they struggled to regain their bearings, they realized that they had been returned to the town of East Haven. But this was not the sleepy fishing village they had left so long ago. An enchantment had fallen over the town, encasing what remained of the shattered homes and buildings in a prison of solid ice. At the center of the destruction, upon the very spot where the Temple of Tempus once stood, rose a massive tower of crystal. Freed from the shackles of his tormented mind, the cursed elven lord was at last able to assist the heroes in their quest. Handing over the Heartstone gem, the party stood back and watched Laro begin his divination. With the artifact raised before him, clutched tightly in his skeletal hands, the undead sorcerer peered intently into the gem as he whispered a series of strange chants and incantations. A spark of light briefly flashed within the gem, as if a ray of sunlight had caught upon its surface. And suddenly, reflected within the mirrored facets of the stone, there appeared an image of a statue. The statue was clearly a monument of sorts, depicting an elf and a dwarf sitting side by side on a dual throne. Defeated at last, the stricken demon fell with a roar that shook the walls of the underground chamber. But the heroes' moment of victory was short-lived, for as the form of their vanquished enemy lay broken upon the floor, so too was the power of the shard broken. The companions soon found themselves scrambling to escape as the fortress began to collapse around their ears. No sooner had they emerged from the secret threshold than the entire tower came crashing down, shattering into a million pieces. Triumphantly, the party of adventurers stood among the ruins, basking in the glory of final victory. And as the first rays of dawn glittered off the scattered fragments of the crystalline tower, a light snow began to fall over the once again peaceful town of East Haven. And so ends the final chapter in my tale, with the forces of good triumphant over the forces of evil. It wasn't long before the destroyed town of East Haven was rebuilt, and a new temple dedicated to Tempus was erected upon the site of the buried portal. As for the vanquished demon, Belhefet, defeated on the Prime, he was banished back to the depths of hell, where he languished for a period of 100 years, tormented by the memory of his mistakes, and waiting for the day he would return to Faerun and exact his revenge. Yes.